The forecourt is one of Dublin's great Georgian buildings, but in terms of the Easter Rising, it's fair to say that it was on the periphery of an area that was occupied by volunteers under the command of Edward Daly. About 100 members of the volunteers would have seized a string of buildings up and down Church Street, centred on the Father Matthew Hall, Riley's pub on the corner of North King Street. They would have had a headquarters of sorts at the entrance to the North Dublin Union, the counterpart of the South Dublin Union on the opposite side of the city, and other houses and buildings in that locality. As happened in many other parts of the city, barricades began to be erected by the volunteers on the first day. Now, one of the volunteers involved in setting up these barricades mentioned that there were houses in the process of being built on one side of Church Street, which provided them with material for barricades. That may be an echo of the Church Street disaster of 1913, where tenement houses had collapsed, and it may well be a veiled reference to reconstruction taking place on that street. Another volunteer mentioned that a car or taxi of some kind had been used in the barricade, so all you had to do to get through the barricade was basically enter one door and leave through the other door of the car or cab, and naturally this weak spot was kept quite well defended. On Monday 24th of April, one of the first instances of fighting took place on the quays near the forecourts when a group of Lancers, mounted troops, who were escorting munitions from the quays up towards the magazine fort in the Phoenix Park, were ambushed by the volunteers in the area. For the most part, the week was relatively quiet. Volunteers would have come in for a good deal of abuse and hostility from many of the locals, though that appeared to dissipate as the week went on. Daly made a point of keeping a bakery, Monk's Bakery, open in the course of the week, so perhaps that alleviated the disruption of everyday life that was experienced elsewhere in the city by ensuring a supply of at least some food to people in the locality. On Wednesday of that week, the Linen Hall Barracks, which was just up Constitution Hill, near to the King's Inns, would have been deliberately burnt out, and other buildings in the area would have been seized. Now, what was so special about the area around the forecourts? Its significance was again related to infrastructure and the idea of preventing troop movements into the city. Given that it was overlooking the quays, it could obviously interfere with any troops who might come down the quays from the Royal Barracks or even from Kingsbridge Station itself. Alongside that, Broadstone Station was not too far from where Daly and his men had occupied, though they did not occupy the station itself. But Broadstone would have housed the terminus for the Midlands Great Western Railway. In other words, the key rail link towards the west of the country, to Galway, and indeed to Kildare. Troops did use that railway to get to Dublin, so by seizing that locality, they were in a position to interfere with troop movements coming into the city, as was the case in many other areas seized by the volunteers. On Friday evening, the fighting in the area became particularly intense. British troops, the South Staffordshire Regiment and the Sherwood Foresters, began to move into the area, and as those troops moved into North King Street, you would have had the killing of civilians in houses along North King Street, probably the most notorious and publicised of incidents involving British troops in the city. And as these troops kind of closed in on Daly and his men, by the Saturday, as one volunteer said, perhaps the fighting was concentrated in a 50-yard stretch of Church Street, and ultimately Daly and his men held out until Saturday evening and surrendered on the Sunday. In the aftermath of the rising, though, the British military authorities who were trying to make sense of what had happened in Dublin took the view that alongside the fighting on Mount Street, what happened in and around North King Street and the forecourts was probably the heaviest fighting that British forces were involved with in the course of the Easter Rising in Dublin.